Good morning again. This is the House Appropriations Committee. It is Friday, January 24th, 2025. We're continuing to go through the budget adjustment and we're taking on some more testimony. And this morning, we're pleased to be joined by the Agency of Education to talk about their budget adjustment. And you all are new and we have many new members on our committee. So we'll go around and introduce ourselves and then we'll have you do the same and turn it over to you. Dave, you are on.
Hi, I'm Dave Chapman. I live in Morristown. I represent the Lamoille, Washington district. Welcome.
Good morning and welcome. I'm John Kosenska. I live in Burke and represent the Essex Caledonia district.
I'm Mike Nigro, represent Bennington Powell. Tom Stevens from Waterbury, representing the Washington district, which is Waterbury, Bolton, Huntington, and Beals Court.
Good morning, Jim Harrison from Chittenden, also represent Mendon, Killington, and Pittsfield.
Robin Shy from Middlebury.
Tiff Willie from Burlington.
Trevor Squirrel, Underhill, and Jericho.
Wayne Rush, Highgate, Franklin, Berkshire, and Richford.
Morning, Mike Murwicky from the Wyndham 4 District, Putney and Dummerston.
Hi, I'm Lynn Dickinson. I represent St. Albans Town.
I'm Sean Puget. I'm the interim CFO at the Agency of Education.
And Jill Briggs Campbell, interim deputy secretary. I'm going to let Sean do most of the talking here today, which is great. And I think our BAA is pretty simple this year, which I
think so.
Hopefully, given the other things that you all are managing, will be a relief.
That's nice. Great. So we have handouts and Mike Murwicky is the contact, everybody. And here's the other details. So do you need to share screen or do you want to, we have everything here?
You have it all.
Okay, yeah, great.
Okay, so thank you for having us in. Go to the agenda page. We're going to talk about FY25 budget. So we've got 3 adjustments to talk about today: licensing, peer review, adult education, and education spending. And then we'll get into the FY24 carryover and reversions of general fund and education fund. Right. Pages there. Slide 3, peer review program. Here we're asking for $75,000 more dollars for this budget line item. There was a moratorium put on the peer review fee that we normally collect for students going through the peer review program to become a teacher. I think in the end, the legislature wanted more teachers going through the program, so they kind of made it free. And then we're given general fund to cover the fee that we no longer collect. And our estimated number is higher than we budgeted. So the 75,000 would cover the difference.
How much is the normal fee for the licensure?
Yeah, it's $1,200 per student. I think these are mostly adults going through the process.
So you have an increasing number of folks coming through.
Yes, yeah, which was the intent.
Yes, I can speak just a little bit. So this is part of the Ed Workforce Initiative, right? We know we've had a real decline in folks entering the profession. We have a lot of different pathways that folks can take. So there's sort of the traditional, you go through a college program. The peer review is an alternative pathway that's really expanded since COVID. And so the General Assembly, in order to reduce that barrier, that $1,200 fee, basically made it free. And the good news is that there's an uptake of that program, which is the intended goal.
And so if you do a peer review for 150 people, do 150 people get their license, or do sometimes people have to go back and do more before they can?
There's a pretty lengthy review process. And so sometimes there's a back and forth. They have a portfolio. They are reviewed by their peers. So there's a panel of peer reviewers. And sometimes they'll ask them to do some additional work or refinement. We've also been partnering with VTNEA. They have a program that is really supporting cohorts of folks going through the program. So our success rate is actually increasing as well. We had, prior to this, the success rate was low. So it was a lot of effort and then folks weren't able to sort of complete. We've actually increased that success rate.
So what's your success rate at? I
would have to check with Andrew Proughton. He's our educator licensure director, but I can get that
Okay, yeah,
But roughly. Just
80%.
Oh, gosh, I would even want to guess. I would guess wrong. But I'll tell you what, I will ping him right now and see if I can get that answer.
Thank you. Questions on that? Okay. All right. I do have a quick question. I remember when we passed this bill, I think I reported it for appropriations at the time. Did we have a sunset on this, or is this just until we decide that we don't want to do it?
2029,
2029, okay.
that's the last.
We have some time. Okay. Thanks.
All right, next slide, adult education and literacy. So we're looking for 506,000 more here. We had a higher number to pay for than we budgeted. And last year's the language changed where we're now splitting the funding here with general fund and ed fund. So it affects two appropriations, B 504 and 504.1. And 303,000 in general fund is needed and 202,000 in education.
And on this one, we're getting some language, because there's that gap of the high school completion students. We stopped that program, started another, and the kids, people who graduated need a certificate.
Right.
So I think we're the ones working on the language. Is that right, Mike? If somebody is, and we've got people working on it. I don't know if you all want to take a look at it before probably that'd be a good idea to have you.
Yeah, that would be really helpful with the new program. So we were aware, right? There's this gap. It seems to be the number is about 120 students, and it's not clear what sort of stage all of those students are in, like have they completed all the requirements? It's just a matter of getting that diploma. The new program is beginning in February. So yeah, I think that would be really helpful. See what that language is and just make sure we haven't already solved the problem, or if there really is that gap that we need to address.
Okay, Mike.
From what we've been hearing from the adult ed people, there's quite a cohort that have finished.
Yeah.
And they're just waiting, they're in this limbo that waiting for us to put language.
Yeah, absolutely. And we recognize the urgency of that. I mean, these are real people who need their diploma for work.
Right, exactly.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely.
Okay, so we'll just make sure that they take a look at it too.
Perfect. That'd be great. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. The education spending slide number 5. Here we're looking to reduce our current year appropriations by 11 million. That's made up of two pieces. We had $3 million in this appropriation to cover the new EL categorical aid grant. And that one was pulled out during the budget process last year and put in its own appropriation line with money. So we kind of had this money in there twice when all things were said and done. So we're just reducing this down because it's already somewhere else in the budget. And then we have 8 million to reduce because when the budget was passed, we still had some pending school district budgets, and as they got amended and eventually passed, it was $8 million less of a need. So that'll be good for the ed fund a little bit.
Any questions? Okay.
All right, and universal meal. Here we're looking to reduce the appropriation by 2.9 million. And that's just to bring it down to the current estimate from our nutrition program.
It's an actual update.
Yeah.
Yeah, we knew when we began the program that it was impossible to predict, and so there was a range. It's
So
data under our belt.
Yeah, and I think that's important, right? I think we all sort of think of 31 million, but that was several years ago. And as the program has gone along, we've been able to refine.
Well, I was thinking 26 million, so I just profited from that. So we had it all over the map and we just had no idea, and now we have like an idea of how it's, and all I do is hear good things about it, so I'm glad.
yes, yeah,
Okay.
it brings it down to 17.5 million for this year.
Let me ask a
Yes.
question on this.
Sure.
When, is this a match? Is the money that we put forward to all the meals, the school meals, is that a federal match? Do we still receive a couple of dollars per meal from the federal government to provide, and then we're adding on top of that? Is that right?
Yeah, we receive
Yeah.
pretty significant federal reimbursement from the way that the program is structured. The person you want to speak to about that is Rosie Kruger. She's our state child nutrition director and has done all of that modeling and all those numbers. But it's not an insignificant dollar amount. It's in the several millions.
Yeah,
annually.
there's several programs, lunch, milk, breakfast.
But when we went so that everyone received meals, whatever the number is, 26 or, does that represent a match to a much larger number? Or did the federal government say anything extra from what we've already given you is on you?
Yeah, I think, I mean, we're reimbursed from the feds per meal. There's a certain dollar amount.
But it's for free and people who are qualified for free and reduced lunch.
Income.
It's based on income level. So by adding more, we're not going to get more federal funds because it's strictly based on
Sure.
on income levels. And so there were some schools that were fully funded by federal funds because they could go through a process about that. And then the rest of the schools were helping to pick it up because of the way we do our education funding. You know, we all pay for everybody's schools. But now everybody's getting the benefit, not just the people who qualify for federal funds.
All right, that's helpful.
Yeah. That's a longer conversation. We could get Rosie in at some point if you want to hear more, but that's my short answer. And so I saw Lynn, Wayne, and then John.
Okay, my understanding is that this was, of course, an income-based thing, and a lot of the things that the federal government does in terms of subsidies for low income is based on the free and reduced lunch number. So even though we provide universal lunches to everybody, or breakfast or whatever, we still have to have the application, and we have to go and screen people, and you have to keep records of that. Is that correct?
Yes, and that those free and reduced lunch, those records have implications for other federal dollars as
Yes.
well, which is unfortunate, frankly, and I don't think anybody's actually happy with that. But it drives title dollars,
A
drives,
lot of things.
yeah, a lot of
Based
things.
on poverty.
So it is really important that we continue to collect those records, and the agency has been doing a fill the form campaign for the last couple of years, and now we're also using Medicaid Direct Cert is another way to do this. So we're trying to ensure that we're still getting those records so that we can continue to drive the federal dollars.
Thank you.
Yeah, but it's really important. Yeah.
My question is similar. So for each student, an application is prepared by the parents, I assume. It gives you the income information that you need and then goes into the school. And how does that get, who processes, what is the system of process? How do those letters go to a financial person someplace that processing that, getting that down?
Do you know the answer to that? This feels like a really good question for Rosie. The sort of the details of the program. So why don't I bring that back to her, and I'll either have her prepare some information for you, or and I'll have her come in because she knows all of those details so well. Yeah.
Thanks.
And this just real quick, what was the estimated total to start with again?
For universal meals?
Yeah.
We started
29 or
with
31.
29 or
Yeah.
I thought it was 29.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I remember a range of like 26 to 29, and I think we put in 27 or something like that. Anyway, now we have some real data. so.
Yeah, great, thank you.
Okay, so that covers our 25 budget adjustment request. So slide 7, we're going to move into our FY 24 carryover and reversions. The slide 8, and we'll start with general fund in our finance and administration appropriation and our education services program. Small amount of a purchase order and finance and admin. And we've got a fairly large 893,000 that we're requesting to carry over on. And that's made up of the items listed on slide 8. Half of it, or almost half of it, is obligations for subgrants and contracts that are already in place that just need to be paid off, in the early part of this year. And then we have those other items.
So you have carryover in here for peer review.
Yes.
But we still need another 75.
Right, this
So
period.
that's including, that's this plus the 75 gets you the whatever you needed for the.
Yeah, this is, we got 105 last year for the peer review program. And when we put in the number of students that went through it, we needed 126. Because it was a new program, I didn't have anything charged to it, so that money just kind of floated there. So we need to carry it forward to make sure we keep our licensing fund whole, because we overspent licensing fund because we didn't spend this. We'll take care of that this year to make sure we're spending down both funds. So that's why that's there. Right, if we're good there. Move on to the next slide.
Yeah, so essentially, all this money was obligated, all the carryover money is for things that are obligated already.
198,000 was, and then the items below were requests we made to finance and administration to carry the money over core. So at this point, yeah, we probably started obligating spending those funds. Yeah, they gave us approval in early September, I believe. Yeah. Right. Three other appropriations had some balances that were asking for carryover. Adult ed and literacy, flexible pathways, and the state board had a small amount. Flexible pathways were carrying over to cover the spring semester of early college or dual enrollment, sorry. And then there was a small obligation on the other two for grants, and then a small contract on the state board balance.
So, are fewer people using flexible pathways, or is this more of a timing thing?
Yeah, so spring semester last year gets paid in.
Have we done this every year? We just do the carryover that way? Is that how we?
I think so.
I'm trying to remember. Question?
And that was dual enrollment?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how many students are doing that? Just curious. You have a sense?
I don't.
A lot.
A lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We have a report on it, so I can see if I can get it to you, but it's a pretty significant percentage of students that end up doing dual enrollment. So we can send that over to you. I don't.
That would be helpful to
Yeah, I'd
have.
love to. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a good piece of information.
Yeah.
I see a lot of students in my area that are
Mhm.
doing that.
Yeah.
They do. Nice to know.
Yeah,
Yep.
that sounds great. Very busy over here chatting with my team.
I can see that. That's all right. We're all doing the same thing.
Yeah.
Just a quick question for us. So a reversion is going to show up in the BAA as money that's gone back into the
General
system.
fund, right.
Carry forwards, or how are those?
They're kept within the budget where it was. They get, so the carryover, carry forward is what we usually call it, is money that didn't get spent, but it stays within that budget itself because it's going to be used.
It's going to
past
still
the year.
show up in FY 25, or is it going to show up in FY 26 budget?
25.
It will, it's in 25, but it may lower what they do in FY 26 because they have money in their savings account basically to use for that program.
Okay. And then just to be clear on this, a sensitive issue with the universal meals, this is not representing a program cutback. This was an overestimate of, this was an over budgeting of what was anticipated, and this is truing up what was actually expended. So,
For 25, yes.
all right, thank you.
Okay, Lynn.
Yeah, here under the carryovers. You have 509,446 for the flexible pathways, and then details, you say it's obligated. Is that, it's not a duplication here, these numbers, 35,000, this is just the second.
Yeah, just one of the
More
descriptions.
detail.
I could have laid it up.
So in this case, they had carry forward that's obligated for something specific as opposed to carry forward that's like, oh, isn't that nice? We have this money.
Yeah, yeah, okay, so we are.
All right, moving on to Ed Fund. We'll start again with the finance and admin appropriation. And we've got 100,000 for a contract obligation, and then we're reverting the rest of our balance of 301,000.
What was that for?
Yeah, so Ed Fund shows up in this appropriation for a couple of things, but the balance was for the SSDMS project.
Oh, yes.
So
That stopped.
that's enough. It hasn't stopped. It's no longer mandatory that the districts.
Oh, okay, so that, right.
Yeah.
I knew we did something.
Yeah, we still have,
It's gonna be everybody was gonna use the same chart of accounts. But this
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
They do have to use the same chart of accounts, but it was that they had to use the same
Software.
yeah,
software. Yeah,
SSDMSS.
SSD.
just rolls off your tongue, Sean.
I know.
It's saying it for years.
Right, special ed. The 502, we've got 2.3 million we're carrying over for grant obligations. And then state place students, fairly large reversion, 13.6 million.
I'm apologize, if this is something I should absolutely know. Who are state-placed students? Are these folks who are in residential schools? I'll let you answer.
Yeah, it's residential schools. I might have written it up.
Out of state.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, I'm sure. Definitions.
All right. Students that are placed outside of their school district by a state agency or licensed child placement agency, or who are residing in a program for pregnant and parenting women, or are placed in residential treatment facility by a state agency, are considered state placed. So,
They may be out of state.
yes, many of them are.
Placed by the state, but it
Yes.
doesn't mean they're in the state.
Yeah.
It's sort of confusing that way. So that's a huge
Huge reversion.
version.
Yeah, so we've typically carried over the balance just in case we needed it.
Yeah.
And looking back this year, we typically don't even spend the current year appropriation. So we decided, why are we
Yeah.
rolling this forward each year? So
And is that getting reverted back to
the education.
the education? Yeah.
These numbers are all already on the outlook they've been using.
Yeah, okay, great. Reparation.
Do you have an estimate of how many state place students there are?
I,
Roughly.
no, I don't.
Dickinson?
Yeah, thank you. This is an expensive program. And you're reverting this back because you say you haven't had the number of students, and you aren't spending what's up to budget. Why are we spending so much less when we hear all of the issues about behavior and mental health? And I mean, are we actually seeing an improvement in the students, or is this, or what?
Our budget this year is 20 million. We're able to live within that. Yeah, I don't have a lot of history with the program, so I can't really answer, if it's.
Yeah, so if you're asking for sort of like, you're asking more questions about performance measures, right? So are we seeing that this program is resulting in a reduction of that? I think we'd have to dig in with the program folks to get an understanding of, is this sort of traditionally we've always over budgeted, or are we seeing a reduction? It could even be as simple as there's not enough spaces available, and that's why we're seeing a reduction. So let's dig in with the program folks on that. We can come back around.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at over time since 1997, we have lost a lot of students.
Yeah.
K-12.
Mhm.
It's gone down a lot. That would sort of indicate there would be less need since we have fewer students. I'm just curious.
Yeah, although generally speaking, we're seeing an increase in mental health needs and behavioral issues across. So even though the student enrollment is declining, the need is probably increasing overall. We can dig in. I don't know that we're going to have sort of very specific data that's going to tie the state place students, but we'll see what we can do. And see.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, that was my quick curiosity too. You know, we're seeing, a demographic change downward, but the need is greater. So we have two things going in different directions.
Yeah.
And these are students that are in state custody, right? For various reasons, as opposed to.
Yeah, students that are being served, their needs are being served in schools. Therapy.
Rush and then Rocky.
So, when the program people come in, or is this gonna be, same question, what are the categories of state-placed students? How many are there? Where are they? Those kinds of things. Are those questions better asked to program people? Are they in more than one agency?
Likely, yeah. So we'll have to do a little bit of cross-agency work there.
And a lot of this, the Education Policy Committee will be handling all of these things too. So.
Yeah, but I think you're asking really good questions. We can absolutely get them. And also, I'll make a data's. I'll make a sort of a general comment about something that we definitely saw during the listen and learn. I think we all heard this last year as well. We are seeing an increase in the mental health sort of needs of our students. And when we did our listen and learn, this was one of our topics with education leaders. So I'll sort of share two pieces I think that will be of interest to this group. The first is there's been a lot of conversation around the ways potentially that the education fund is absorbing the cost of supporting students' sort of mental health needs within the schools. So in an effort to try to quantify that, we worked with business managers and sort of looked through the Uniform Chart of Accounts and our teacher staff survey. And we sort of came up with a methodology that we then brought out to the field and said, okay, let's look at this. Is this a methodology by which we could begin to try to quantify this? And I think the answer is no. And partly it's because our Uniform Chart of Accounts is not used uniformly, but also there really genuinely aren't codes that really help to capture this is a mental health cost, right? So we can do things like, a school psychologist, right? We can say, that's a mental health cost. But there's a whole category. I'm just giving you a specific example. There's a whole category of staff that's called interventionist. And that covers everything from a literacy interventionist to a behavior interventionist. And so really saying that's a mental health cost is really, we can't do that with confidence. Another piece of it is trying to draw a clear line between what is social emotional learning and what is behavioral supports for classroom management and what is a mental health support is almost an impossible endeavor. So I would say we tried. It was a failure by which we learned something, and that there's really more work to be done if we want to quantify this. But we also ask qualitative questions. And what is very clear across the board in every region that we went to is that we're seeing more extreme behaviors in schools. We're seeing younger students than ever before that have mental health needs, and they tend to externalize their behaviors, whereas older students tend to internalize their behaviors. So it does sort of become also a classroom management sort of situation. So we have both qualitative and quantitative data that we can point to that's saying, yes, this is a real need. And then the other thing that we saw is we know, the same kinds of pressures that our education system is under, we also know that our healthcare system is also experiencing. And, schools have those students who walk in the door and they have a responsibility to educate them. And so they're making great efforts to do so. But what we have is a misalignment of services and resources. So some of our students who have the most acute needs that really need to be addressed outside of the school system, those community services are not available to them. They're still in the school. And so if we have tiers of support, the tiers of support are misaligned from the top all the way down, and that's expensive and it's not effective. So this is something that we really do need to sort of grapple with collectively. But that is one of those growing cost pressures. But what we did find is there was no real clear way to say, it's $150 million. Like we just are not able to do that with, and I think for all the reasons I just described, some of which have to do with accounting codes and some of which just have to do with the way that services are delivered.
Yeah, I'm going to go back to the SSDS program that was initiated, I guess, a couple of years ago. The goal, I served as a trustee on a school where we were required, we were owned by the communities and the students had to attend our school. It was an independent high school. We did not have the same chart of accounts that they had. And at that time, back in the late 80s, they were trying to create a uniform chart of accounts for all the schools, period, for everybody. And we had to change what we've been doing for years, which was loosey-goosey to be anyway. But then we came here and we did IKEA here, and then there was another attempt to do a chart of accounts that would be uniform. So you could compare school A to school B to school C. You could see how they spent their money, we're looking at equity in education. And then just a couple of years ago, we did it again. That's at SDS.
Right.
And I remember the chairman of this committee complaining on the floor that you couldn't compare one school to the other. Now, this is like 40 years. The point is that, and in healthcare, you compare it to healthcare, very similar kinds of dynamics, very similar kind of situations. They have codes, about 16 different codes for every kind of thing, so you can cover and document what the things are. And when it comes to the kind of money we're spending and the kind of needs that we're addressing, it seems to me that there's got to be a way that you can find a chart of accounts, first of all, so we can compare schools. So we know school A is spending this, but school B is spending that, but school A spends less, yet they have better results for their students academically or behaviorally, or so we can see the results of what kind of money we put in, that's accountability. Mm-hmm. And second of all, you should be able to figure out what's an academic intervention versus a health intervention versus a behavioral intervention versus a mental health intervention. I mean, you can make up codes for that. Mm-hmm. And that way you could also find out what is the source of the disruption or where the money's going.
Yeah.
And you could line it up. And if I had been on that listening and learning tour, I probably would have said this to you at the time. But this can be done. It is done every day in every healthcare environment in the state.
Yeah.
And it should be done in our schools.
Yeah.
And it's been discussed we know it's a need.
Yeah.
Go
Okay.
ahead, Sean.
So-
I was gonna say, I bet Sean agrees.
Yeah. So, we've been collecting our data under the Uniform Chart of Accounts since FY20. So the comparable between schools, they may not use it exactly the same, but
Mhm.
they're pretty close and getting better.
Mhm.
So that's some good news. These costs aren't education costs, and our chart is based on the federal chart for school districts. So they're just not built in that way. We reached out to our federal counterparts and they said, no, the chart doesn't have it. We have a committee, AOE, and some business managers from the school districts that meet about the chart of accounts and our handbook that, tells them how to use it. And, this is a topic we're trying to work through to see what we can do, what codes we can assign, so that we can start tracking it better. We're trying to make progress there.
I think there's always two things when we're talking about this. There's fidelity of implementation, right? And that's work that Sean and that team are going to do, right? To ensure that, we do have a uniform chart of accounts. It maybe needs additional codes. The education delivery system has become more complicated as we ask schools to do more. We need to be able to account for that. So I think that's work that's underway and can be done. And then we have just the barrier that is the complexity of our system and the way that we have allowed for significant local control. Everyone gets to pick their own system. That was the controversy of SSD and EMS, right? This idea that everyone would be on one software. So we always have those tensions. I would suggest that it's not something that we're done doing work on. And I would also suggest that moving to a simplified governance system would probably go a long way to managing a lot of our data. This, it's not just finance data, it's every piece of data that you can imagine. We run into this constantly.
Yeah, see, I see as a former school board member, former trustee, working in a complex system in a high school that was not really part of an SU and then became part of an SU and went through all this stuff. My personal feeling is that it is not up to an individual school to opt out. We as a legislature should set up a piece of statute that says, we're the size of Rochester, New York.
Yeah.
We're not like New York or California, and they have more centralized control systems than we do.
We do make it complicated.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Education always brings out the conversation, and we can be here for days, and we're gonna move on. Rep. Maricki, you have a question.
I did. I just wanted to continue the thread that Representative Roche had shared about where our kids are going. And I know when I was working in family services, there was seemingly a trend starting where we were sending kids in custody to New Hampshire and maybe Massachusetts, and then Pennsylvania, Arkansas, and Mississippi. It would be helpful to know if it's a larger trend and where are they going.
Okay, that sounds great. We can get you that.
Thanks. And let's continue. I think we're on page 11 now. Is that right?
Page 11, yes.
Okay.
Free appropriations here, education spending grant. So this appropriation is the 1.9 billion. That is the large appropriation for us. We're reverting the balance from last year, 359,000. So we spent most of it or sent it most out to the schools. Small school, that appropriation ended. Actually got replaced by the Merger Support Grant. So we're reverting the balance there. And then the tech ed appropriation, we've got some obligations on the balance there for 367,000. And our last page, page 12, like 3 more appropriations, flexible pathways. We're looking to carry over 1.774 million for obligations and anticipated increases. And then we're reverting 1.3 million. I believe most of the reversion is due to the high school completion program ending. So we carried over what we needed and then reverting the balance there to close out that program.
So high school completion, but we're increasing the amount to adult learning. So this must be like the net of what you're increasing. You're increasing by 500 and something thousand, whatever the number was back further. And yet you're reverting another 1.3 million, but you're saying it's not all high school completion, that you think some of it is?
Yes.
So what I'm seeing here though is basically $3 million of flexible pathways that hasn't been spent.
Right.
It's a lot. Because the whole program is what, 8 million?
Yeah, I mean, early college is 4 million plus
Right.
by itself. High school completion was almost 2, I think. Yeah, you're probably in the ballpark.
I seem to remember that that's about what it was. So it makes me wonder about the program that a good half of it doesn't seem to be being used.
And again, I think the 1.7, some of that is to cover the last semester of last year, it gets paid in this year.
And how much was that, the dual enrollment for the spring semester?
Which you had elsewhere.
Yeah.
That was the general fund, so that one's funded with general and ed.
Right.
But
So this is from the education fund, and
Yeah.
you're not spending as much. Yeah.
So in a case like this where some is being withheld, I'm assuming that those are expenditures, the carry forwards or expenditures that you're expected, as it says, right?
Yes.
That those are committed funds and you're 1.3. During post-election season, I was invited to go talk to at CCV about the early college program, and they're looking for funding. Is this a case where, was this base money, or were these one-time funds? Is this something that you may have considered or can consider to be adding to something like the early college program that fits in here?
This is base money. I think early college, we pay for CCV, I think they pay per credit. So, and they set the credit rate. So I don't know how we would.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about what the sandbox here, like, could you decide that, oh my goodness, we had this surplus or unexpended funds, could it be redone? And I'm just getting used to how this works, so please
Set
be
the
patient
base.
with those questions. I'm just trying to like figure out, like, well, again, if this was a base thing that you had flexibility with, would that be something that could be done? Or do we have to keep going back to what we're giving people the permission to spend and how they spend it? Is that where this fits? Does that make sense? Identified need, surplus funds, can those surplus funds, I'm sorry, maybe identified need isn't quite the right word, but identified desire to grow the program. Could those funds be transferred over in any of this process that we're working on?
To where instead?
To say if the early college program is seeing pressures and they need money to grow,
Right.
could that be
Oh, yeah.
reallocated that way within the division, within?
I'm not sure the answer to that. I think maybe not. I think if we are going to carry forward, it has to be used for the original purpose for which it was intended. If we revert, it can be changed
Right.
to where we
But
go.
it's still a step process that
It's
comes.
still a two-step process.
So we could, and this is all hypothetical, I don't
Yeah,
have,
yeah.
I don't have an axe to grind here, but just, we could hypothetically say, oh, well, this was 1.3 extra. I mean, we are essentially, if it's going back into the general fund, and it's going.
Going back into the
AA,
education
yeah.
fund.
Okay, I'm good, thanks, yeah.
So I think I am tracking a question there, which we'll work on running down, which is in essence, are we underutilizing this flexible
Do we
pathway?
need all the money?
Do we need all the money? Or, is there other reasons that maybe it's trending this way? So I'm going to work on running that down.
And this gets into a much larger conversation, which is not for this committee, but for the education committee, which is what are the costs that should be in the education fund? And everybody has their pet thing that needs to be moved to the general fund and their thing that should be staying in the education fund. And at the same time, we have to say, we don't want to make this a shell game. And, we'll reduce the education fund because we'll just have the general fund pick it all up. Well, you haven't lowered the expenses, so we haven't actually done anything. So that's silly. But we do have to, I think as a state, the conversation needs to be had, what should be included? What's education and what should be included? And are we, because education has changed from the one-room schoolhouse of the 1800s, we offer a lot more services. Maybe they all should be in there. Maybe some should, some shouldn't. That's not, but it's a conversation that has to be had, as we look at education funding. So that I'm sure will be ongoing. Great. Yes, Mike.
Wonder if I could put on the table this idea of the $182,000 request to have the Agency of Education be a fiscal agent for a childcare food program. Familiar with this?
I mean, we have a child nutrition.
I get it. This was the request we've been getting.
Well, it was a request we got yesterday, and it's to increase money for the sponsors for this
Right. And I'm
a child nutrition.
as I'm digging into this, I'm realizing maybe that the idea is for you to be the fiscal agent. It doesn't seem like anyone has asked you yet.
I think this is going to be a rosy. I mean,
She's ready to come in whenever you need her. And if we could maybe just identify what those questions are.
yeah, and I don't, and we'll have to decide if actually this is for budget adjustment or whether
That's the other
it's
question.
just for it may be for the big bill, because it isn't something that has come from, it just popped up and we're about to be done with this bill, so.
Okay.
Well, we can discuss that more with the education committee too and get their recommendation.
Oh,
And I see you have, you see you to carry that over, just to kind of pause that, given all.
Well, I would say consider those funds all obligated at this point.
Yeah.
It's not available. I think final payment to Burlington just went out.
yes.
And all of the other funds have been obligated through grants, and it's really just as those impacted schools seek reimbursement. So as I like to say, the $32 million is gone at
Yes.
this point. And then we also had 4.5 million from Department of Environmental Conservation was moved over to the Agency of Education to support ongoing remediation work for schools that were impacted.
Yeah.
And so those funds are largely allocated as well.
Okay, great, thank you. Lynn?
Yeah, I just want to ask about this other issue about Act 64 universal meals. That looks like a $6+ million reversion. Just had a decrease in $2.9 million.
This was a balance from last year.
This is
We
the balance.
already did that earlier, yeah. It happened earlier in the.
Okay.
And I can report back. I did get some numbers on the peer review from Andrew Proughton.
Oh, great.
Quickly pulled them together. So the way that he described it is in the first year of peer review, which was actually during, I think, the first year of COVID. I actually remember this. There was about 40% of the applicants had to do some sort of, it was called a plan of action to basically improve their portfolio. So 40%. Not a failure rate, but you have to do more. Through some changes in the process, which have made it less burdensome, and also the support of VTNEA, we're down to only about 10%. We need to make those modifications. So I think that's a really nice increase.
And some people, as they may need to do more, may just say, oh, I guess I really don't want to do this, so.
Yeah,
some of it.
and we also almost doubled the number of folks that we can review in a year. So that's just process improvement and streamlining the process for everyone.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's great. Revolution.
So on the meals we discussed earlier, we have an application form, and based on income, depends on what you get, right? Universal meals work that way also?
No, universal meals is sort of agnostic. So any student walking in the door can receive a free breakfast and free lunch.
They were delivering by bus to homes during summer. Is that part of that too?
I think the summer program is a different program. There is a, I only like dip my toe in these waters, but there's like a dozen, alphabet soup of programs that are all involved in getting meals to students.
So, great. And we're done. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
We appreciate
Thank you.
it, and welcome to your new interim positions.
It's such a.
Okay, comfortable.
It's getting clunky at the beginning. And we will work on, so I've got sort of three requests out. So one is for Rosie. I'll let you put the request in. She'd be happy to come in. The second I have is getting some more information around the flexible pathways. So both the number of folks enrolled in dual enrollment and early college, and then also what's happening with that reversion.
Trends, yeah.
Yeah, what are the trends there? And then the third was data and information around state place students is what I heard is our three to-dos. Fantastic.
Thank you very
so
much.
much.
Thank you.
Have a lovely weekend.
Yeah.
Thank you both.
Not. Yeah, we have 4 minutes. Let's go off live.